I don't care what that piece of paper says. You're disrupting my cabin, intimidating my first-class passengers.
You're disrupting my cabin, intimidating my first-class passengers, and frankly, you don't belong here. Now gather your things and move to economy where you belong, or I'll have airport security drag you off this aircraft in handcuffs. Captain Derek Morrison's voice cut through the hushed first-class cabin like a blade through silk. His silver hair gleamed under the overhead lights, 4 gold stripes on his shoulder epaulets catching the afternoon sun streaming through the oval windows of the Boeing 787. At 54, Morrison commanded Apex Airways Flight AX847 with the authority of a man who had never been questioned, never been challenged, and certainly never been told he was wrong. The woman sitting calmly in seat 1A didn't flinch. Maya Thompson, 38 years old, looked up at the towering pilot with eyes that held depths Morrison couldn't fathom. She wore faded jeans, an oversized navy sweater that had seen better days, and white sneakers that looked like they'd walked through more airports than Morrison had flown over. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she carried no designer purse, no flashy jewelry, nothing that screamed wealth or importance. To every eye in the cabin, she looked like someone who had wandered into the wrong section by mistake. But Maya Thompson wasn't lost. She was exactly where she needed to be. Captain Maya said, her voice steady and measured. This conversation will define both our futures. Choose your next words carefully. Morrison's jaw tightened. In 25 years of flying, no passenger had ever spoken to him with such quiet confidence. It unnerved him, though he'd never admit it. The audacity of this woman sitting in the most expensive seat on the aircraft, talking to him like she had authority. Behind Maya, the first-class cabin buzzed with tension. 16 premium seats filled with the kind of passengers who paid top dollar for privacy and luxury. They watched the confrontation unfold with the fascination of spectators at a sporting event, some openly staring, others pretending to read magazines while stealing glances at the drama. In seat 2A, Brandon Phillips III shifted uncomfortably. At 29, Brandon carried himself with the swagger of inherited wealth and political connections. His father, Senator Phillips, had ensured his son never wanted for anything, including the belief that the world owed him deference. Brandon had specifically requested seat 1A for this flight, claiming he needed the extra leg room for his business equipment, a laptop bag that could have fit under any seat on the plane. "Look," Brandon interjected, his voice dripping with entitled frustration. "I don't want to make this a bigger deal than it needs to be, but I booked 1A specifically." My assistant confirmed it 3 times. He looked at Maya with barely concealed disdain. "I'm sure there's been some kind of mix-up in the system." Sofia Martinez, the senior flight attendant, stood frozen near the galley. At 26, Sofia had worked for Apex Airways for 4 years, long enough to recognize the signs of a situation spiraling out of control. She clutched her passenger manifest, knowing full well that Maya Thompson's name was printed clearly next to seat 1A, but also knowing that challenging Captain Morrison could cost her job. Miss Martinez Morrison barked, without taking his eyes off Maya. "Show me the manifest. Let's settle this right now." Sofia approached with trembling hands, the paper rustling as she held it out. Morrison snatched it, scanned the list, and his scowl deepened. Maya Thompson, seat 1A. The reservation was legitimate, purchased 5 days ago, full fare paid in advance. But Morrison's pride wouldn't let him back down. Not in front of a cabin full of first-class passengers. Not when his authority had been questioned by someone who looked like, well, someone who clearly didn't belong in first class. "I don't care what this says," Morrison said, his voice rising. "Security protocols give me final authority over passenger seating. If I determine someone is a security risk, I have the right to relocate them." Maya's eyebrows rose slightly. Security risk. What exactly have I done that constitutes a security threat? Captain Morrison felt the eyes of every passenger boring into him. He needed to justify his position to maintain the authority that had never failed him before. You're being argumentative with crew members disrupting the boarding process, and frankly, your attitude is concerning to other passengers." A murmur rippled through the cabin. Several passengers exchanged glances, clearly confused by Morrison's characterization of the soft-spoken woman who had been sitting quietly reading a book since she'd boarded. In seat 3B, Dr. Elena Vasquez, a respected physician flying to Miami for a medical conference, slowly reached for her phone. Something about this confrontation felt wrong, felt dangerous, felt like something that needed to be documented. Her finger hovered over the video record button. Maya's response was quiet, but carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Captain Morrison, I need you to understand something very important. In exactly 87 minutes when we touch down in Miami, you will discover that every decision you make in the next few minutes will have consequences you cannot imagine." Morrison laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the curved cabin walls. "Is that supposed to be a threat, ma'am? I've been flying longer than you've been alive, and I know exactly what kind of passenger belongs in my first-class cabin." The words hung in the air like a challenge, like a line drawn in the sand that could never be uncrossed. Maya looked at Morrison with something that might have been pity, then reached into her carry-on bag and pulled out her phone. "Sofia," Maya said, addressing the flight attendant directly, "would you please note the time, 2:47 p.m. I want this moment recorded for the official record." Sofia looked helplessly between Maya and Morrison, her hand instinctively moving to the small notebook she kept for passenger service notes. Morrison's face darkened. "Put that away," he ordered Sofia. "This passenger is disrupting flight operations and interfering with crew duties. I'm calling airport security." Maya settled back in her seat, fastened her seatbelt with deliberate precision, and folded her hands in her lap. "Captain Morrison, you have just made the most expensive mistake of your professional life. When this is over, when the dust settles and the truth comes to light, I want you to remember this exact moment. Remember the choice you made to judge someone based on how they looked rather than who they were." Brandon Phillips, sensing an opportunity to curry favor with the captain, leaned forward. "Hey, look, this doesn't need to be complicated. The lady can take my seat in 2A. I'll take 1A where I'm supposed to be. Everybody's happy." "She doesn't belong in first class at all," Morrison snapped. "Economy has plenty of seats available." Maya's phone buzzed with an incoming text message. She glanced at it briefly, then looked back at Morrison with an expression that had subtly shifted. Where there had been patience, now there was something harder, more resolute. Captain Maya said, her voice carrying a new edge. "I'm going to give you one last opportunity to reconsider your position. Not because I'm intimidated by your threats, but because I believe in giving people the chance to do the right thing." Morrison keyed his radio, the static crackling through the cabin's tense atmosphere. "Boston Ground Control. This is Apex 847. We have a disruptive passenger situation requiring security assistance." The die was cast. The moment Morrison had feared challenging his authority had become the moment Maya Thompson realized that her new airline needed a complete overhaul, starting with its leadership. As Morrison lowered his radio, confident he had reasserted control, Maya reached for her phone again. This time she opened an app that no other passenger on the aircraft had access to. The Apex Airways executive portal that had been transferred to her control just 6 days earlier when the acquisition papers were signed. In exactly 87 minutes, Captain Derek Morrison would learn that the woman he had just humiliated, threatened, and falsely reported as a security risk owned every plane in the Apex Airways fleet, including the one he was standing in. But first, Maya Thompson was going to let him dig his grave a little deeper. Maya Thompson hadn't always been the kind of person who could buy airlines on a Tuesday and transform entire corporations by Thursday. 15 years ago, she had been a 23-year-old computer science graduate with a brilliant mind crushing student loan debt and a dream of revolutionizing aviation technology. She had also been the young black woman standing in the marble lobby of the Grand Meridian Hotel in Atlanta dressed in her best interview suit, watching the desk clerk look her up and down with the same expression now etched on Captain Morrison's face. "I'm sorry, but we don't have any availability," the clerk had said, despite Maya's confirmed reservation and the obviously empty lobby behind him. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at one of the budget motels near the airport." That humiliation had cost Maya a job interview with Delta's emerging technology division. It had also planted the seed of an idea that would eventually grow into Thompson Aerospace Holdings, a company worth $12 billion and growing. Maya had built her empire one algorithm at a time, starting with aviation scheduling software that she coded in her studio apartment while working 3 part-time jobs. Her first breakthrough came when she developed a predictive maintenance system that could identify aircraft component failures weeks before they happened, potentially saving airlines millions in emergency repairs and flight delays. 6 days ago, after months of careful planning and discreet negotiations, Maya had completed the acquisition of Meridian Global Industries, the parent company of Apex Airways. The purchase had been structured through shell corporations and investment firms to ensure complete anonymity. Maya wanted to experience her new airline as a regular passenger before revealing her ownership to see firsthand what kind of company she had bought and what kind of changes needed to be made. She was getting her answer faster than expected. Captain Derek Morrison had joined Apex Airways 25 years ago as a young co-pilot with dreams of flying for the major carriers. He had the skills and the training, but he also had an ego that grew larger with every promotion, every commendation, every year of unchallenged authority. Morrison had cultivated relationships with wealthy passengers, politicians, and business executives who flew Apex regularly. He prided himself on knowing who belonged in first class and who didn't, and he had never been shy about expressing those opinions. Over the years, there had been complaints. Passengers who felt discriminated against crew members who witnessed inappropriate behavior, gate agents who reported concerning incidents. But Morrison's flight safety record was impeccable. His connections ran deep, and Apex's previous management had always found it easier to quietly transfer complaining employees or offer token apologies to offended passengers, rather than confront one of their most senior pilots. Morrison's worldview was simple. Aviation was a hierarchical industry where rank, experience, and connections determined your place. Passengers in first class had earned their seats through wealth status or influence. Passengers in economy were grateful for whatever service they received. And people like the woman currently occupying seat 1A were clearly trying to game a system they didn't belong in. Brandon Phillips III represented everything Morrison respected about first-class passengers. Born into privilege, educated at elite institutions connected to political power through his senator father. Brandon had never worked for anything he possessed, but Morrison saw that as evidence of breeding, of belonging to the class of people who naturally occupied premium spaces. Brandon's sense of entitlement ran so deep, he couldn't comprehend that someone who looked like Maya Thompson could have legitimately purchased a first-class ticket. In his world, there were people who belonged and people who pretended to belong, and he had appointed himself as a guardian against the pretenders. "I fly this route twice a month for business," Brandon had told Sofia earlier during boarding, his voice loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "My father specifically requested that I sit in 1A because I need the space for sensitive government contractor equipment." He gestured to his laptop bag as if it contained nuclear launch codes rather than a MacBook and some financial reports. Sofia Martinez had grown up in Houston, the daughter of immigrants who cleaned office buildings to pay for her education. She had put herself through college with dreams of becoming a teacher, but the flexibility of flight attendant work allowed her to support her mother and younger brothers while pursuing her real goal of law school. Sofia was 3 semesters away from her law degree, taking classes online between flights and studying in airport lounges during layovers. Working for Apex Airways had taught Sofia to navigate the complex dynamics between crew and passengers, to manage difficult situations with diplomacy, and to recognize when authority was being abused. She had witnessed discrimination before, Subtle comments, preferential treatment based on appearance assumptions about who could afford premium services. But she had also learned that challenging powerful people could end her career before she had the chance to build one. Watching Captain Morrison confront Maya Thompson, Sofia felt the familiar knot in her stomach that came when she witnessed injustice but felt powerless to stop it. Everything about Maya's behavior indicated a legitimate passenger who had done absolutely nothing wrong. Morrison's accusations of disruption and security threats were fabrications, and Sofia knew it. Dr. Elena Vasquez had earned her medical degree from Johns Hopkins and built a respected cardiology practice in Boston. At 45, she had traveled extensively for medical conferences and had seen enough of the world to recognize discrimination when it was happening in real time. Elena had experienced her own share of bias as a Hispanic woman in a predominantly male medical field, and she understood the delicate balance between fighting injustice and avoiding confrontation. Seated in 3B with her phone now discreetly positioned to record, Elena watched the drama unfold with the analytical mind of someone trained to assess situations quickly and accurately. Morrison's behavior exhibited all the classic signs of someone in power using that authority to mask personal bias. Maya's responses demonstrated the controlled composure of someone who was accustomed to being underestimated, but possessed resources Morrison couldn't imagine. James Wilson occupied seat 4A, returning to Miami after closing a real estate deal in Boston. At 34, James had built his success through social media marketing and understood the viral potential of the confrontation he was witnessing. His Instagram account had 50,000 followers, and his live streaming videos regularly attracted engaged audiences who trusted his commentary on social issues. James had started recording the moment Morrison raised his voice, initially planning to capture what seemed like standard airline drama. But as the situation escalated, he realized he was documenting something more significant, a clear case of discrimination happening in real time with multiple witnesses and verifiable evidence. The other first-class passengers represented a cross-section of wealth and influence. Mrs. Patricia O'Brien, 67 years old, was a retired federal judge who had spent her career fighting discrimination in the court system. Carlos Mendoza, 34, owned a successful construction company and had experienced his own encounters with people who assumed his appearance meant he couldn't afford the spaces he occupied. Ashley Roberts, 28, worked in corporate communications and immediately recognized the public relations disaster unfolding before her eyes. Each passenger brought their own perspective to the confrontation, their own experiences with power and prejudice, their own internal calculations about whether to remain silent or speak up. The aircraft cabin had become a microcosm of society where assumptions about race class and belonging were being tested in real time. Maya Thompson understood all of this better than any of them realized. Her success hadn't come from avoiding discrimination, but from transforming it into motivation. Every door that had been closed to her because of her appearance had driven her to build her own doors. Every assumption that she didn't belong had fueled her determination to create spaces where everyone belonged. The acquisition of Apex Airways hadn't been motivated by revenge or a desire to prove a point. Maya had identified the airline as an undervalued asset with significant potential for growth and modernization. But sitting in seat 1A, watching Captain Morrison fabricate security concerns to justify his bias, Maya realized that her new company's problems ran deeper than financial performance or operational efficiency. Apex Airways had a culture problem, and culture problems started with leadership. Morrison's radio crackled with a response from ground control. Apex 847 security is en route to your gate. Please hold position pending resolution. Maya reached for her phone again this time, opening a secure messaging app that connected her directly to her legal team, her executive staff, and the board of directors who had approved the Apex acquisition. In the next few minutes, she was going to need documentation, witnesses, and evidence to ensure that whatever happened next would result in meaningful change, rather than another quietly buried complaint. Brandon Phillips, oblivious to the gravity of the situation he had helped create, leaned back in seat 2A with satisfaction. "I appreciate you handling this professionally, Captain," he said. "My father always says that maintaining standards is what separates premium services from the regular crowd." Morrison nodded approvingly. This was exactly the kind of passenger feedback he valued, recognition from people who understood quality and exclusivity. "Mr. Phillips, I've been flying long enough to spot trouble before it starts. Sometimes you have to take a firm stand to maintain cabin safety." Sofia Martinez felt sick. She was watching two powerful men congratulate themselves for humiliating a passenger who had done nothing wrong, and she was complicit in her silence. But challenging them would mean losing her job, sacrificing her law school dreams, and abandoning her family's financial security. Maya Thompson looked around the cabin, taking inventory of the passengers, noting who was watching with concern and who was avoiding eye contact. She saw Elena discreetly recording James live streaming to his social media followers and Patricia O'Brien's disgusted expression. She also saw the passengers who were pretending nothing unusual was happening, hoping to avoid involvement in whatever consequences might follow. In a few minutes, airport security would board the aircraft. Morrison would present his fabricated version of events, painting Maya as a disruptive passenger who posed a threat to flight safety. The security officers would be faced with the choice between believing a veteran pilot with an impeccable record or a woman whose appearance aligned with Morrison's narrative of troublemaker. Maya Thompson was about to discover exactly what kind of people worked for her new airline, and they were about to discover exactly who they had been working for all along. The plane's engines hummed quietly in the background as the confrontation moved toward its inevitable climax. In the next few minutes, lives would change, careers would end, and the trajectory of an entire company would shift based on the choices people made when they thought no one important was watching. But someone very important was watching, and she owned the building. "Ma'am, I need to see some additional identification." Captain Morrison said, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he used when he wanted to intimidate passengers into compliance. "First-class tickets are expensive, and we need to verify that this seat was purchased legitimately." Maya looked up from her phone with an expression of calm disbelief. "Captain, are you seriously suggesting that I somehow obtained this ticket illegally?" "I'm suggesting," Morrison replied, his chest puffing out with authority, "that premium seats cost more than some people make in a month, and I have a responsibility to ensure that all passengers can actually afford the services they're claiming to have purchased." The silence that followed was deafening. Every passenger in the first-class cabin understood exactly what Morrison was implying, and the ugly reality of it hung in the air, like smoke from a fire that was about to become a full-scale conflagration. Brandon Phillips nodded approvingly from seat 2A. "Exactly right, Captain. These premium tickets aren't cheap. My father's office spends over $200,000 annually on travel, and we expect a certain level of appropriate clientele in first class." Maya's phone buzzed with another message. She glanced at it quickly. A text from her chief financial officer confirming that the wire transfer for the Apex Airways acquisition had cleared and that all legal documentation was finalized. Maya was now legally and officially the sole owner of the airline whose captain was demanding she prove her worthiness to occupy a seat she had purchased. "Let me understand this correctly." Maya said, her voice steady but carrying an edge that made Sofia Martinez step closer. "You want me to prove that I can afford a first-class ticket? Is this standard procedure for Apex Airways? Or is this verification process reserved for specific types of passengers?" Morrison's face reddened. The woman's composed response was making him look foolish in front of passengers who expected him to handle disruptions with swift authority. "It's standard procedure when passengers exhibit behavior that raises security concerns." "What behavior specifically has raised security concerns?" "Your argumentative attitude, for starters. Your refusal to cooperate with crew instructions. Your general demeanor suggests someone who isn't accustomed to first-class travel. Dr. Elena Vasquez, still recording discreetly from seat 3B, felt her medical training kick in as she observed Morrison's escalating agitation. His breathing was shallow, his face was flushed, and his hands were trembling slightly. All signs of someone whose adrenaline was spiking as he painted himself into a corner he couldn't escape from gracefully. James Wilson's Instagram livestream had attracted over 3,000 viewers, and the comments were pouring in faster than he could read them. "Y'all seeing this discrimination in real time?" he whispered to his phone. "Captain's literally asking this woman to prove she can afford her seat. This is 2024, people." The viewer comments were unanimously supportive of Maya. "This is disgusting. Sue them all. Record everything. Where is this happening?" James turned his screen so viewers could see the confrontation clearly while keeping his voice low enough not to interfere. "Captain Morrison," Maya said, reaching into her carry-on bag, "since you've requested additional verification, let me provide you with some documentation." She pulled out her wallet, extracting a black credit card that caught the light streaming through the cabin windows. "This is my American Express Centurion card. It has no preset spending limit. The annual fee alone is more than most people's monthly rent." She placed the card on the armrest where Morrison could see it clearly. "This card requires an invitation from American Express and a net worth verification of at least $10 million. Is this sufficient proof that I can afford a first-class ticket, or would you like me to call my accountant and have him verify my bank balances?" Brandon Phillips leaned forward to examine the card, his confidence wavering as he recognized the exclusive Centurion status. Only about 10,000 people in the United States possessed Black American Express cards, and Brandon's own Platinum card suddenly seemed inadequate by comparison. Morrison stared at the card, his certainty beginning to crack. But admitting error now would mean acknowledging that his judgment had been based on appearance rather than behavior, and his pride wouldn't allow that retreat. Possession of a credit card doesn't guarantee legitimate use. Identity theft and fraud are common problems in aviation. "Are you accusing me of credit card fraud?" "I'm saying that security protocols require us to verify passenger identity when concerns arise." Sofia Martinez felt her stomach drop. She had never witnessed a captain go this far to justify obvious discrimination, and she knew that Morrison was creating a liability nightmare for the airline. Every word was being recorded by multiple passengers, and every accusation was escalating the legal exposure that would follow. Maya looked around the cabin, making eye contact with several passengers who were clearly uncomfortable with Morrison's behavior. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this disruption to your travel experience. You're witnessing something that unfortunately still happens in 2024. A paying passenger being harassed because someone in authority has decided that her appearance doesn't match their expectations for first-class travelers." Mrs. Patricia O'Brien, the retired federal judge in seat 2C, spoke up for the first time. "Captain, I've been observing this interaction, and I haven't seen this passenger exhibit any behavior that could reasonably be construed as disruptive or threatening. Your accusations appear to be without foundation." Morrison turned toward the judge with irritation. "Ma'am, I appreciate your concern, but flight safety is my responsibility, and I don't need passengers second-guessing my professional judgment." "Flight safety?" Patricia replied sharply. "How exactly does this woman's presence in first class threaten flight safety?" She's been sitting quietly reading a book and responding calmly to increasingly hostile questioning. If anyone is being disruptive, it's not her. Carlos Mendoza, the construction company owner in seat 4C, stood up slowly. At 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders, Carlos commanded attention when he moved. "Hey, Captain, I've been watching this whole thing, and the lady hasn't done nothing wrong. Why don't you just let her sit in her seat and get this plane moving?" Morrison felt his authority slipping away as passengers began challenging his narrative. "Sir, I need you to take your seat immediately. Passengers standing during taxi operations is a safety violation. "We're not taxiing," Carlos responded. "We're sitting at the gate while you harass a woman for no reason." Ashley Roberts, the communications professional in seat 3A, was already mentally composing the social media posts that would follow this incident. She had witnessed enough corporate disasters to recognize when a company's reputation was about to implode in real time. Captain speaking as someone who works in corporate communications, I strongly recommend you reconsider your approach here. This situation is being recorded by multiple passengers, and the optics are extremely problematic. Brandon Phillips. Sensing the mood shifting against Morrison, attempted to regain control of the narrative. "Look, everybody, let's stay calm. The captain is just following procedures. Maybe there's been a misunderstanding, but security protocols exist for a reason." "What security threat, doctor?" Elena Vasquez asked, her medical precision cutting through Brandon's diplomatic language. "Please identify the specific behavior that constitutes a security concern." Brandon fumbled for a response. "Well, she's being argumentative with the crew. She's responding to accusations and demands for documentation. That's not argumentative. That's appropriate pushback against harassment." Maya watched the dynamics shift as passengers began defending her against Morrison's increasingly indefensible position. She felt a mix of gratitude for their support and sadness that such support was necessary. These people were witnessing obvious injustice and choosing to speak up. But how many similar incidents occurred without witnesses, without recording devices, without passengers willing to challenge authority? Morrison keyed his radio again, his voice tight with frustration. "Boston Ground Control, Apex 847. Our disruptive passenger situation is escalating. We need security personnel immediately." The radio response was immediate. "Apex 847 security is approaching your aircraft now. Please stand by for boarding." Maya's phone buzzed with an urgent message from her head of security at Thompson Aerospace Holdings news outlets, picking up social media posts about incident on flight AX847. "Legal team standing by. Need guidance on response strategy." Maya typed back quickly. "Document everything. Full investigation once incident concludes. No public comment until we have complete picture." Sofia Martinez approached Morrison with desperate concern. "Captain, with all respect, I think this situation might be getting out of hand. The passenger has provided identification, she's been cooperative, and the other passengers are becoming upset. Maybe we should—" "Miss Martinez," Morrison snapped, "I gave you a direct instruction to stop interfering with this security matter. One more word and you'll be written up for insubordination." Sofia felt tears of frustration building. She was watching injustice unfold in real time. Her career was potentially at risk for speaking up, and the passengers were looking to crew members to show leadership and moral courage. But challenging Morrison meant sacrificing everything she had worked for. Maya observed Sofia's internal struggle with compassion. The young flight attendant was caught between doing what was right and protecting her livelihood, a position that no employee should ever be forced into. "Captain Morrison." Maya said, her voice carrying a new quality that made everyone in the cabin pay attention. "I want to make sure I understand the record we're creating here. You've accused me of being disruptive, argumentative, and potentially fraudulent, despite the fact that I've been sitting quietly in my assigned seat, responding calmly to your questions and providing documentation when requested." "That's correct." "You've demanded additional identification beyond what's required for domestic travel, suggested that my credit card might be stolen, and implied that my appearance indicates I can't afford first-class service." Morrison hesitated, realizing that Maya's summary made his behavior sound worse than he intended. "I'm following established security protocols." "Show me these protocols. I'd like to review the specific policies that authorize you to demand financial verification from passengers based on their appearance. I don't need to show you internal company policies." "Actually," Maya said, reaching for her phone, "you do." Maya opened the Apex Airways employee handbook on her phone, the same handbook that Morrison carried in his flight bag but apparently hadn't read carefully. She found the relevant section and began reading aloud. Apex Airways Policy 247C, Passenger Verification Procedures. Additional identification may be requested only when passengers exhibit behavior consistent with security threats, including but not limited to verbal threats, physical aggression, intoxication, or attempts to access restricted areas. Under no circumstances may crew members request financial verification or make assumptions about passenger eligibility based on appearance, dress race, or ethnicity. The cabin fell silent as Maya's words hung in the air. Morrison had just violated explicit company policy in front of multiple witnesses, and everyone knew it. James Wilson's live stream viewers had grown to over 8,000, and the comments were exploding with outrage and support for Maya. She knows the policies better than the pilot, one viewer wrote. This woman is a lawyer or something, added another. Captain just got schooled, observed a third. Maya continued reading from her phone. Further policy, 247C, states that any crew member who violates these procedures is subject to immediate disciplinary action up to and including termination. Brandon Phillips shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Morrison's confident authority was crumbling, and Brandon was beginning to realize that his support for the captain's actions might have consequences he hadn't anticipated. Morrison's radio crackled with an update. Apex 847 security is boarding your aircraft now. 3 airport security officers entered the first-class cabin led by Sergeant Michael Rodriguez, a 15-year veteran of airport law enforcement. Rodriguez had responded to hundreds of aircraft disturbances, and he immediately began assessing the situation with the practiced eye of someone who knew how to separate facts from emotions. Captain Morrison Rodriguez identified the pilot and approached professionally. We received reports of a disruptive passenger situation. Morrison pointed toward Maya. This passenger has been argumentative, refused crew instructions, and exhibits behavior consistent with security concerns. We need her removed from the aircraft. Rodriguez looked at Maya, who was sitting calmly in her seat, hands folded, making eye contact, but showing no signs of agitation or aggression. His experience told him that genuinely disruptive passengers were usually obvious. They were agitated, loud sometimes, intoxicated, often belligerent with authority figures. Ma'am Rodriguez addressed Maya directly. "Can you tell me what's happening here?" "Certainly, officer. I boarded the aircraft with a valid ticket for seat 1A. I've been sitting quietly reading when Captain Morrison approached and demanded that I prove I could afford this seat. When I asked for clarification, he accused me of being disruptive and suggested that my credit card might be fraudulent. I've provided all requested documentation and haven't exhibited any behavior that could reasonably be considered threatening or disruptive." Rodriguez turned to Morrison. "Captain, what specific behavior prompted your security concern?" Morrison felt the weight of multiple cameras pointed at him. The skeptical expressions of passengers who had witnessed the entire interaction and the professional assessment of a security officer who clearly wasn't seeing evidence of the threat Morrison had reported. She was argumentative, Morrison repeated, but his conviction was wavering. Argumentative? How she questioned my authority. She refused to accept my assessment of the situation. Rodriguez had heard enough. In his 15 years of airport security, he had never removed a passenger for questioning authority or refusing to accept assessments. Passengers questioned flight delays, seat assignments, baggage policies, and meal choices every day. None of that constituted disruptive behavior requiring law enforcement intervention. "Captain, based on my observation, this passenger appears calm and cooperative. What specific FAA regulation or law has she violated?" Morrison's mouth opened, then closed. He had painted himself into a corner with no exits remaining. Either he admitted that his security concern was fabricated, or he doubled down on accusations that were becoming more obviously baseless with each passing moment. Maya watched Morrison's internal struggle with something approaching sympathy. She knew exactly how this would end, had known from the moment Morrison first demanded her documentation. But she also knew that some lessons could only be learned through experience, and Morrison was about to receive an education that would change the trajectory of his life forever. The aircraft cabin had become a courtroom with Morrison as the defendant, Maya as the victim, and 16 first-class passengers as the jury. The verdict was becoming increasingly obvious to everyone except the accused. Dr. Elena Vasquez had seen enough. As a physician, she was trained to document critical events with precision and clarity, and the confrontation unfolding before her qualified as exactly the kind of incident that required careful observation and detailed recording. Her phone, positioned discreetly against her purse, had captured the entire interaction from Morrison's initial accusations through Maya's policy recitation. But Elena wasn't the only passenger documenting the incident. The first-class cabin had become a digital courtroom where multiple witnesses were creating a comprehensive record of discrimination in real time. James Wilson's Instagram livestream had exploded to over 12,000 viewers, and the comments were cascading so rapidly he could barely track them. "This is absolutely disgusting behavior," wrote one user with the handle Justice Warrior 47. "That pilot needs to be fired immediately, added travel rights. Ma'am, get that captain's name and report this to the FAA," suggested aviation expert. James had positioned his phone to capture both Morrison and Maya in the frame, providing his viewers with a clear view of body language and facial expressions that revealed more than words alone. Morrison's agitation was increasingly obvious. Flushed face, defensive posture, hands gesturing erratically as his justifications became more desperate. Maya's composure remained unshakable, creating a stark contrast that viewers immediately recognized. "Y'all, this is live discrimination happening on an airplane in 2024, James whispered to his audience. "This woman has done absolutely nothing wrong, and this pilot is trying to remove her from first class because of how she looks. Make sure you're recording this moment because this is exactly how bias operates in corporate America." Ashley Roberts, the communications professional, understood the viral potential of what she was witnessing. She had managed crisis communications for major corporations, and she recognized the exact moment when a company's reputation crossed the point of no return. Morrison's behavior wasn't just discriminatory. It was creating documentary evidence that would live forever on social media platforms and news outlets. Ashley began taking detailed notes on her phone, creating a timeline of events that could be used for potential legal proceedings or media reports. She documented Morrison's specific statements, Maya's calm responses, and the reactions of other passengers who were challenging the pilot's authority. This wasn't just airline drama. This was a case study in how individual bias could destroy institutional credibility. Carlos Mendoza had started recording on his phone when Morrison first accused Maya of being argumentative. As a Hispanic business owner, Carlos had experienced his own encounters with people who assumed his appearance meant he didn't belong in exclusive spaces. He recognized the dynamics playing out in the cabin because he had lived them personally. "My daughter's going to see this video," Carlos said quietly to his wife Maria, who was sitting beside him. "She needs to understand that this stuff still happens, but also that people can stand up and fight back." Maria nodded her own phone recording from a different angle. "Look at how calm she is," Maria whispered. "She knows something the pilot doesn't know." Mrs. Patricia O'Brien, the retired federal judge, had prosecuted civil rights cases for 30 years before ascending to the bench. She recognized the legal implications of Morrison's behavior with the precision of someone who had seen discrimination cases rise and fall based on documentation and witness testimony. Patricia was taking detailed written notes, creating the kind of contemporaneous record that could be crucial in subsequent legal proceedings. "This is a textbook case of disparate treatment," Patricia murmured to herself, her legal training automatically cataloging the evidence. "Morrison is applying standards to this passenger that he clearly doesn't apply to others, and he's doing it based on observable characteristics protected under federal law." Meanwhile, Sofia Martinez was facing the most difficult decision of her professional life. As the senior flight attendant, she had a duty to support her captain's decisions regarding passenger safety and aircraft security. But she also had a conscience that was screaming at her to speak up against obvious injustice. Sofia had been discreetly recording audio on her phone since Morrison first raised his voice. Flight attendants were trained to document unusual incidents for liability protection, but Sofia knew that her recording would contradict Morrison's narrative. The audio clearly captured Morrison's escalating accusations, Maya's calm responses, and the captain's inability to identify any specific behavior that justified his security concerns. But challenging Morrison meant risking her job, her health insurance, her ability to support her family, and her dreams of finishing law school. Sofia was 3 semesters away from her degree, and losing her airline job would make completing her education financially impossible. Maya, observing Sofia's internal struggle, felt a surge of protective instinct. The young flight attendant was caught in an impossible position, forced to choose between moral courage and economic survival. It was exactly the kind of institutional pressure that allowed discrimination to persist, even when individual employees recognized it as wrong. Officer Rodriguez Maya said, addressing the security sergeant, "I'd like to request that this incident be officially documented. Multiple passengers have been recording this interaction, and I want to ensure that all evidence is preserved for investigation by the appropriate authorities." Rodriguez nodded professionally. "Ma'am, we document all passenger incidents as standard procedure. Can you provide me with your identification and ticket information?" Maya handed over her driver's license and pulled up her boarding pass on her phone. Rodriguez examined both documents carefully, noting that everything appeared legitimate and properly processed. Maya Thompson, Seat 1A. First class service, properly confirmed reservation. Captain Morrison Rodriguez said, "I need you to walk me through the specific behavior that prompted your security concern. Please be as detailed as possible." Morrison felt the walls closing in. Multiple passengers were recording a federal security officer was demanding specifics, and his vague accusations were being examined under the harsh light of professional scrutiny. She was questioning my authority as captain. She refused to accept my judgment about passenger seating. Did she make any threats? No, but her attitude was concerning. Did she exhibit any aggressive behavior? She was argumentative. Did she violate any FAA regulations or airline policies? Morrison paused, realizing that every answer was making his position weaker. She was disrupting the boarding process. Rodriguez looked around the cabin. Boarding had been completed 20 minutes ago. All passengers were seated and secured. The only disruption to normal operations was the confrontation Morrison had initiated. Dr. Elena Vasquez decided that her oath to do no harm extended beyond medical practice to basic human decency. "Officer Rodriguez," she said, standing up in her seat. "I'm Dr. Elena Vasquez, and I've been observing this entire interaction. I have video documentation showing that this passenger has exhibited no disruptive behavior whatsoever." Captain Morrison's accusations appear to be without foundation. Rodriguez turned toward Elena with interest. Witness testimony from a medical professional carried significant weight in incident reports. "Doctor, what specifically did you observe?" "The passenger has been sitting quietly since boarding." She responded calmly to increasingly hostile questioning. She provided requested documentation without argument. She even quoted company policies to clarify the captain's authority regarding passenger verification. At no point has she exhibited behavior that could reasonably be considered disruptive or threatening. Elena held up her phone. "I have clear video documentation of the entire interaction, including audio of the captain's statements and the passenger's responses. If needed, I'm prepared to provide this evidence to aviation authorities or legal representatives." James Wilson's live stream audience had grown to over 15,000 viewers, and the story was beginning to spread across multiple social media platforms. Viewers were sharing the stream to Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok, creating a viral moment that was attracting attention from news outlets and aviation industry observers. Breaking discrimination incident on Apex Airways. Flight AX847, one user with the handle Breaking Aviation tweeted with a clip from James's stream. Pilot demanding first-class passenger prove she can afford her seat. Multiple witnesses recording. This is unacceptable. The hashtag Apex Discrimination was beginning to trend with social media users, sharing their own experiences of airline bias and expressing outrage at Morrison's behavior. Aviation industry reporters were taking notice, recognizing the potential for a major story about discrimination in commercial aviation. Maya's phone buzzed with updates from her media monitoring service. The incident was being discussed on Twitter by civil rights organizations, aviation industry publications, and travel bloggers who recognized the significance of what was unfolding. Her legal team was tracking the viral spread and preparing for the media attention that would follow. Ashley Roberts, monitoring social media in real time, could see the reputation damage spreading across digital platforms like wildfire. "Captain Morrison," she said, "I work in corporate communications, and I need you to understand that this incident is already viral on social media. Multiple news outlets are picking up the story. Whatever decisions you make in the next few minutes are going to have consequences far beyond this flight." Brandon Phillips, finally grasping the magnitude of the situation, attempted to distance himself from Morrison's actions. "Look, maybe there's been a misunderstanding here. I didn't mean to suggest that anyone couldn't afford their seat. I was just trying to help resolve a scheduling conflict." But the damage was done. Multiple recordings captured Brandon's earlier statements supporting Morrison's discriminatory behavior, and his attempt at backtracking only highlighted his complicity in the harassment. Carlos Mendoza stood up again, his construction worker's frame commanding attention in the cabin. "Officer Rodriguez, I've been flying for business for 10 years, and I've never seen anything like this. This pilot is making stuff up to justify treating this lady badly, and everybody on this plane knows it." Maria Mendoza added her voice. "My husband is right. We've been watching the whole thing, and she hasn't done anything wrong. The pilot is the one being disruptive." Rodriguez was rapidly reaching his own conclusions about the situation. In his 15 years of airport security, he had developed reliable instincts about genuine security threats versus manufactured controversies. Morrison's behavior exhibited all the classic signs of someone fabricating justifications for personal bias. Maya watched the digital documentation unfold with professional interest. As a CEO who had navigated multiple corporate crises, she understood the power of social media to hold institutions accountable. But she also knew that viral moments without follow-through often resulted in temporary outrage followed by eventual forgetting. This incident wouldn't be forgotten because Maya Thompson was about to ensure that it resulted in fundamental changes that would prevent future discrimination. Sofia Martinez made her decision. Years of watching injustice while staying silent had prepared her for this moment, even if she didn't know it. "Captain Morrison," she said, her voice stronger than she felt, "I need to speak with Officer Rodriguez privately about what I've observed during this incident." Morrison's face went pale. Sofia was the senior flight attendant, and her testimony would carry enormous weight in any investigation. If she contradicted his narrative, his career was effectively over. "Miss Martinez, you are not authorized to discuss internal airline matters with external authorities." "Actually," Sofia replied, surprising herself with her own courage, "I'm required to report safety violations and policy breaches to appropriate authorities. That's in my employee handbook, which I actually read." Rodriguez nodded approvingly. "Miss Martinez, I'd like to hear your observations as a crew member who witnessed this incident." Maya felt a surge of pride watching Sofia find her voice. The young flight attendant was risking everything to speak truth to power, demonstrating exactly the kind of moral courage that Maya hoped to foster throughout her new company. The cabin had become a tribunal where evidence was being presented, witnesses were offering testimony, and the truth was emerging through the collective courage of people who refused to remain silent in the face of injustice. Morrison realized that his authority was evaporating in real time, documented by multiple cameras and observed by federal security personnel. But admitting error would destroy his career just as surely as doubling down on his false accusations. Maya Thompson was about to show him that some choices carried consequences regardless of which option he selected. Maya Thompson had been patient long enough. For 23 minutes she had endured accusations, demands for verification, and increasingly desperate attempts to justify obvious discrimination. She had watched Morrison dig himself deeper into a hole that would soon become his professional grave. She had seen Brandon Phillips expose his own entitled bias. She had witnessed Sofia Martinez find the courage to speak truth to power. Now it was time to end the charade. Maya stood up slowly from seat 1A, her movement commanding immediate attention from everyone in the cabin. At 5 feet 7 inches, she possessed the kind of presence that filled a room regardless of her physical stature. Her calm demeanor had never wavered, but now there was something different about her energy. A shift from defensive patience to quiet authority that made even Morrison pause in his escalating tirade. "Captain Morrison," Maya said, her voice carrying a new quality that made every passenger lean forward to listen. "You mentioned that you've been flying long enough to know who belongs in first class and who doesn't. You've demanded documentation to verify that I can afford this seat. You've suggested that my appearance indicates I'm not accustomed to premium travel." She reached into her carry-on bag and pulled out a sleek tablet computer, swiping it to life with the confidence of someone accessing familiar information. "Since you're so concerned about verification and documentation, let me provide you with some clarity about exactly who you've been harassing for the past 23 minutes. Morrison felt a chill of uncertainty. Something about Maya's tone had changed, and the shift made him profoundly uncomfortable. Other passengers sensed it too. The atmosphere in the cabin had become electric with anticipation. Maya touched the screen of her tablet and the Apex Airways executive portal opened, displaying a dashboard that no passenger should have access to. Company financial data, fleet management information, employee records, and operational statistics filled the screen in neat organized widgets that painted a comprehensive picture of airline operations. "Ladies and gentlemen," Maya continued, her voice now carrying the unmistakable authority of someone who was accustomed to commanding boardrooms and making decisions that affected thousands of people, "allow me to properly introduce myself." She turned the tablet screen toward Morrison, then slowly rotated it so other passengers could see the executive interface clearly displayed. At the top of the screen, in bold letters, was a welcome message: "Maya Thompson, Chairman and CEO, Apex Airways Group." The silence that followed was profound. For a moment, the only sound in the cabin was the steady hum of the aircraft's auxiliary power unit and the faint noise of ground crew preparing the plane for departure. Then, like a wave breaking against a shore, gasps and whispers erupted throughout first class. "Oh my God." Sofia Martinez breathed, her hand flying to cover her mouth as the full implications hit her. James Wilson's live stream exploded with activity as viewers realized what they were witnessing. She owns the airline," he whispered excitedly into his phone. "This pilot just tried to kick the CEO out of first class." The viewer count surged past 20,000 as people shared the stream across social media platforms. Dr. Elena Vasquez, still recording, captured Morrison's face as the reality sank in. The arrogant confidence drained from his features, replaced by dawning horror as he understood the magnitude of his mistake. "This can't be happening," he muttered, staring at the screen. Brandon Phillips went completely silent for the first time since boarding, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and mounting panic as he realized that his father's political connections wouldn't protect him from the consequences of harassing his family's new, most important business contact. Maya touched another section of her tablet, bringing up acquisition documents that clearly showed the purchase of Meridian Global Industries Apex Airways' parent company completed 6 days earlier. The purchase price was prominently displayed $3.2 billion paid in full through Thompson Aerospace Holdings. 6 days ago, Maya said, her voice now carrying the weight of absolute authority, I completed the acquisition of this airline through my company Thompson Aerospace Holdings. This purchase made me the sole owner of every aircraft in the Apex Airways fleet, including this Boeing 787 that you're currently commanding, Captain Morrison. Morrison's legs almost buckled. 25 years of flying, and he had never imagined a scenario where he would find himself confronting the owner of his airline in such circumstances. "Ma'am," he stammered, "if I had known who you were—" "Stop right there," Maya interrupted, her voice sharp with controlled anger. "That statement reveals exactly what's wrong with your thinking, Captain. You're suggesting that my treatment should depend on who I am rather than how I behave. You're admitting that you would have acted differently if you had known about my position, which means you've just confessed to treating passengers differently based on your assumptions about their status and importance." She stepped closer to Morrison, forcing him to look down at her, which somehow made him appear smaller and more diminished. "I want you to understand something very clearly, Captain. I didn't board this aircraft as the CEO of Apex Airways. I boarded as a passenger, hoping to experience our service anonymously and assess the quality of the company I had just purchased. You've given me exactly the assessment I needed." Sofia Martinez felt tears welling up in her eyes as she realized that Maya had witnessed her struggling with the decision to speak up, had seen her torn between moral courage and economic survival, and now understood exactly why employee advocacy would be crucial for the airline's transformation. "Every word you've spoken, every accusation you've made, every moment of this confrontation has been recorded by multiple passengers and broadcast live to thousands of viewers," Maya continued. "You've created a perfect documentary of institutional bias in action, and you've done it while unknowingly harassing the person who signs your paychecks. Officer Rodriguez, who had been observing the revelation with professional interest, stepped forward. "Ma'am, I need to verify your identity for our incident report. This situation has obviously taken on new dimensions." Maya handed Rodriguez her driver's license along with corporate identification that confirmed her position as chairman and CEO of Thompson Aerospace Holdings. Rodriguez examined the documents carefully, then looked at Maya with newfound respect. "Ma'am, I apologize for any inconvenience this incident has caused. Based on my observation, you've exhibited no disruptive behavior whatsoever, and Captain Morrison's security concerns appear to have been without foundation." Maya nodded graciously. "Officer Rodriguez, thank you for conducting a professional investigation. I'll be providing a detailed report to federal aviation authorities about this incident, and I want you to know that your handling of this situation has been exemplary." She turned back to Morrison, who was staring at his feet like a child who had been caught misbehaving. "Captain Morrison, do you remember what you said about knowing who belongs in first class? About some passengers not being accustomed to premium service? About people like me not belonging in spaces like this?" Morrison couldn't meet her eyes. The arrogance that had powered his discrimination had evaporated, leaving behind only the hollow recognition of a career-ending mistake. "I built Thompson Aerospace Holdings from nothing." Maya said, her voice carrying the quiet strength of someone who had overcome every obstacle placed in her path. "I coded software in my studio apartment while working 3 jobs to pay off student loans. I revolutionized aviation maintenance protocols that have saved airlines billions of dollars and prevented countless safety incidents. I've earned every dollar of the fortune that allowed me to purchase this airline, and I've done it while facing people like you who thought they could determine where I belonged." Ashley Roberts, still taking detailed notes, recognized that she was witnessing a masterclass in corporate leadership. Maya wasn't just asserting her authority. She was demonstrating how power could be wielded with dignity and purpose, rather than petty vindictiveness. "Captain Morrison." Maya continued, "You are relieved of duty, Effective immediately. Officer Rodriguez, I'll need you to escort Captain Morrison from this aircraft so that we can proceed with departure under competent leadership. Morrison's face crumpled as 25 years of flying ended in public humiliation and professional disgrace. Please, he whispered. I have a mortgage alimony payments, a pension that requires 5 more years of service. Flying is all I know. Maya looked at Morrison with something that might have been sympathy, but her voice remained firm. You should have considered those consequences before you decided to abuse your authority. Your employment with Apex Airways is terminated immediately, and I'll be recommending to federal authorities that your pilot's license be revoked for filing false security reports and engaging in discriminatory behavior that compromised flight safety. Brandon Phillips, realizing that his own behavior had been captured on multiple recordings, attempted damage control. Ms. Thompson, I want to apologize for any misunderstanding. I didn't realize... Mr. Phillips, Maya interrupted. You are permanently banned from all Apex Airways flights. Your behavior demonstrated exactly the kind of entitled discrimination that we will not tolerate from passengers. I suggest you find alternative transportation for your future travel needs. Brandon's face went white as he realized that his father's political career could be damaged by association with this incident. The viral nature of the confrontation meant that Senator Phillips would need to publicly distance himself from his son's behavior or face questions about his own values and judgment. Sofia Martinez, emboldened by Maya's demonstration of principled leadership, stepped forward. Ms. Thompson, I want you to know that I witnessed everything Captain Morrison did, and I have audio recordings of the entire incident. I was torn between speaking up and protecting my job, but watching you handle this situation with such grace has shown me what real leadership looks like. Maya smiled at Sofia with genuine warmth. Miss Martinez, you found your voice when it mattered most, despite the personal risks involved. That's exactly the kind of moral courage we need from our crew members. I want to discuss your career development opportunities once we land in Miami. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood up, still holding her phone with its incriminating video evidence. Ms. Thompson, as a physician and frequent traveler, I want you to know that this incident represents a widespread problem in the aviation industry. I have complete documentation of this discrimination, and I'm prepared to testify in any legal proceedings that may follow. Maya nodded appreciatively. Dr. Vasquez, I would welcome your testimony. Incidents like this don't happen in isolation. They reflect deeper cultural problems that require comprehensive solutions. James Wilson's live stream had reached nearly 30,000 viewers, and major news outlets were beginning to contact him about licensing rights to his video footage. The story was spreading across social media platforms faster than news organizations could track, creating a viral moment that would reshape conversations about discrimination in corporate America. Carlos Mendoza stood up and extended his hand toward Maya. Ma'am, I want to shake your hand. Watching you handle this situation with dignity instead of anger shows the kind of person you are. This airline is lucky to have you as an owner. Maya shook Carlos's hand firmly. Mr. Mendoza, thank you for speaking up when you saw injustice. That kind of moral courage from passengers is just as important as leadership from management. Mrs. Patricia O'Brien, the retired federal judge, approached Maya with her detailed written notes. Ms. Thompson, I've documented this entire incident from a legal perspective. Morrison's behavior constitutes clear violations of federal anti-discrimination laws, and his false security report could result in criminal charges. If you need expert witness testimony, I'm at your disposal. Maya accepted Patricia's notes gratefully. Your Honor, your legal expertise will be invaluable as we work to ensure this incident results in meaningful accountability rather than just temporary embarrassment. As Officer Rodriguez escorted Morrison off the aircraft, the disgraced pilot turned back toward Maya one final time. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I let my prejudices cloud my judgment, and I betrayed the trust that passengers placed in me. Maya looked at Morrison with measured consideration. Captain Morrison, I appreciate your apology. I hope you use this experience to examine your biases and work toward becoming a better person. But apologies don't undo discrimination, and personal growth doesn't erase professional consequences. The aircraft cabin, which had been filled with tension and conflict 20 minutes earlier, now buzzed with excited conversation as passengers processed what they had witnessed. They had expected routine travel, and instead had observed a master class in justice, dignity, and the power of truth to transform circumstances. Maya Thompson had revealed her identity not to intimidate or embarrass, but to demonstrate that authority should be used to protect rather than persecute, to include rather than exclude, to lift up rather than tear down. The real flight was just beginning. Within minutes of Captain Morrison's removal from Flight AX-847, the aircraft cabin transformed from a scene of confrontation into a hub of organized activity. Maya Thompson, now operating in full CEO mode, moved with the precision of someone accustomed to managing crises and implementing rapid organizational changes. "Ladies and gentlemen," Maya announced to the first-class passengers, "I sincerely apologize for the delay and disruption to your travel plans. What you witnessed was completely unacceptable, and it does not represent the standards that Apex Airways will maintain going forward." She touched her tablet screen, accessing the airline's operational functions. "Our new captain, Rebecca Santos, will be boarding momentarily to complete our departure preparations. Captain Santos is one of our most experienced pilots, and she will ensure your safety and comfort for the remainder of our flight to Miami." Captain Rebecca Santos, a 34-year-old Hispanic pilot with 12 years of commercial aviation experience, entered the cabin 5 minutes later. Rebecca had been Maya's personally selected replacement for Morrison, a deliberate choice that demonstrated the new leadership's commitment to diversity and excellence over old boy networks and inherited privilege. "Good afternoon, everyone," Rebecca announced with confident professionalism. "I apologize for the disruption, and I want to assure you that we'll have you safely in Miami within the next 3 hours. Our crew has completed all pre-flight preparations and we're cleared for immediate departure." Sofia Martinez, still processing the revelation that Maya owned the airline, approached Rebecca with renewed confidence. "Captain Santos, the cabin is secure and all passengers are seated. We're ready for departure whenever you are." Rebecca nodded approvingly. "Thank you, Sofia. I've heard excellent things about your professionalism, and I look forward to working with you." Maya observed the interaction between Rebecca and Sofia with satisfaction. This was exactly the kind of respectful, collaborative relationship that should exist between pilots and flight attendants, a partnership based on mutual respect rather than hierarchical intimidation. Meanwhile, James Wilson's live stream had become a social media phenomenon. His viewer count had surged past 40,000, and major news organizations were contacting him about licensing his footage. "Y'all, I can't believe what just happened," James told his audience. "This woman just fired the pilot who tried to kick her out of first class, and now she's running the airline like she owns it, because she literally does own it." The comments were exploding with reactions. "This is the best instant karma ever," wrote one viewer with the username JusticeSeeker23. "That pilot got exactly what he deserved. Added travel rights. Ms. Thompson handled that with such class and dignity," observed Inspiration Daily. Dr. Elena Vasquez had stopped recording but was now organizing her documentation for potential legal proceedings. As a physician, she understood the importance of maintaining detailed medical records, and she approached legal evidence with the same meticulous attention to detail. "Ms. Thompson, she said, I've documented this entire incident with video, audio, and written notes. If you need medical expert testimony about the psychological impact of discrimination, I'm prepared to provide it." Maya shook Elena's hand gratefully. "Dr. Vasquez, your documentation will be crucial for ensuring accountability. I want to make certain that this incident results in real change rather than just temporary consequences." Brandon Phillips sat in stunned silence, finally grasping the magnitude of his mistake. His phone had been buzzing with text messages from his father's chief of staff demanding immediate explanations for the social media posts that were beginning to tag Senator Phillips in connection with his son's discriminatory behavior. Ashley Roberts, the communications professional, approached Maya with professional respect. Ms. Thompson, I work in corporate communications, and I want you to know that your handling of this crisis has been exceptional. You've demonstrated how leadership should respond to discrimination, with firmness, dignity, and a commitment to comprehensive change. Maya appreciated Ashley's professional perspective. Thank you, Ashley. Crisis management isn't about controlling narratives. It's about addressing root causes and ensuring that problems are solved rather than hidden. Carlos Mendoza and his wife Maria were taking selfies with Maya, having asked permission to commemorate their experience witnessing justice in action. My daughter is going to be so proud when she sees this, Carlos said. She needs to know that people can stand up to bullies even when those bullies have authority. Maya posed for the photos graciously. Carlos, please tell your daughter that standing up for what's right is always worth the risk even when it feels scary. Mrs. Patricia O'Brien, the retired federal judge, was reviewing her detailed notes and preparing a formal legal assessment of the incident. Ms. Thompson, she said Morrison's behavior constitutes clear violations of federal civil rights laws. His false security report to airport authorities could result in criminal charges for filing a false police report. If you pursue legal action, this is an exceptionally strong case. Maya nodded thoughtfully. Your Honor, I want to ensure that the consequences extend beyond Morrison's individual punishment. This incident reveals cultural problems that require comprehensive solutions. Officer Rodriguez returned to the aircraft to complete his incident report, now understanding that he had been investigating the harassment of the airline's owner by her own employee. Ms. Thompson, I need to inform you that Captain Morrison's false security report constitutes a federal crime. We'll be filing charges for making false statements to law enforcement and potentially for interference with commercial aviation operations. Maya appreciated Rodriguez's professional handling of the situation. Officer Rodriguez, I want you to know that your investigation was thorough and fair. You treated both parties with respect while gathering facts, which is exactly how these situations should be handled. Sofia Martinez was experiencing an emotional transformation as she processed the events of the past hour. For years, she had watched discrimination occur while feeling powerless to challenge it. Maya's example had shown her that moral courage was not only possible, but essential for creating change. Ms. Thompson. Sofia said, I want to thank you for showing me what real leadership looks like. Watching you stand up to Morrison while maintaining your dignity has inspired me to be braver in my own life. Maya smiled warmly. Sofia, you found your courage when it mattered most. Speaking up against Morrison, despite the risks to your career, demonstrated exactly the kind of integrity we need from our team members. Rebecca Santos's voice came over the intercom with a professional update. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been cleared for takeoff and will be departing for Miami in approximately 2 minutes. Flight time will be 2 hours and 47 minutes, and we expect smooth skies for the entire journey. As the aircraft began its taxi toward the runway, Maya's phone was buzzing with updates from her executive team, legal counsel, and media relations staff. The incident had become a viral sensation that was attracting attention from civil rights organizations, aviation industry, publications, and major news networks. Her chief operating officer texted news outlets requesting interviews. Legal team reviewing video evidence. Board of Directors expressing full support for your response. Stock price up 3% on positive social media reaction. Maya's head of human resources wrote, reviewing Morrison's employment file. Multiple previous discrimination complaints were settled quietly. Need immediate policy changes to prevent future incidents. Her general counsel messaged federal authorities investigating Morrison's false security report. Potential criminal charges pending. Recommend comprehensive discrimination audit of all airline policies. Maya began composing responses to her team while the aircraft accelerated down the runway. This incident would catalyze the comprehensive transformation she had envisioned for Apex Airways, but it would also serve as a model for how corporations should respond to discrimination within their organizations. James Wilson was providing live commentary as the plane took off. "We're wheels up, everybody." Ms. Maya Thompson just showed the world how to handle discrimination with grace and strength. That pilot thought he could intimidate her because of how she looked, but she owned the whole airline. This is instant karma at its finest. His viewers were sharing clips across social media platforms, creating a viral moment that would reach millions of people within hours. The hashtag #MayaOwns. This was trending on Twitter, with users celebrating Maya's composed response to obvious discrimination. Dr. Elena Vasquez was already planning to use this incident as a teaching moment for her medical students. Discrimination isn't just about individual prejudice, she would tell them. It's about systems that allow bias to operate unchecked until someone with power decides to change them. Brandon Phillips was frantically texting his father's staff, trying to minimize the political damage from his association with Morrison's discriminatory behavior. But the video evidence was clear, and his entitled comments had been broadcast to thousands of viewers who were sharing clips with his name prominently attached. Senator Phillips would release a statement within hours. "I am appalled by my son's behavior and comments during this incident. His views do not reflect my values or my commitment to civil rights. I have cut all financial support and will be donating equivalent amounts to civil rights organizations." Ashley Roberts was taking notes for the case study she would write about Maya's crisis management approach. "This is textbook leadership," she thought. "Don't hide from problems. Don't attack critics. Don't make excuses. Address root causes, demonstrate values through actions, and use crises as opportunities to show who you really are." Carlos Mendoza was already planning to share the video with his construction crews as an example of how to stand up to discrimination in the workplace. Sometimes he would tell them the person you're dealing with has more power than you realize, but that's not why you should treat them with respect. You treat everyone with respect because it's the right thing to do. Sofia Martinez was processing the emotional weight of witnessing transformational leadership firsthand. Maya hadn't just fired a discriminatory employee. She had shown Sofia that moral courage was possible even in situations where speaking up carried personal risks. Mrs. Patricia O'Brien was already drafting a detailed legal analysis of the incident that she would submit to federal aviation authorities and civil rights organizations. Morrison's behavior had created a perfect case study for training programs on recognizing and responding to workplace discrimination. Maya Thompson was implementing the first phase of her plan to transform Apex Airways into a model organization for inclusion and respect. The incident with Morrison had been deeply offensive and personally hurtful, but it had also provided irrefutable evidence of the cultural changes that needed to be made. As Flight AX847 reached cruising altitude, Maya was already planning the comprehensive reforms that would ensure no passenger would ever again experience the discrimination she had endured. The real work was just beginning, but the foundation had been laid by choosing courage over comfort, truth over convenience, and justice over expedience. The aircraft cabin, which had been the scene of ugly discrimination 90 minutes earlier, was now filled with passengers who had witnessed how individual courage could transform institutional culture. They had seen how power could be wielded with dignity, how authority could be used to protect rather than persecute, and how one person's refusal to accept injustice could create ripple effects that would improve experiences for countless future travelers. Maya Thompson had bought an airline 6 days earlier, but on Flight AX847, she had done something more important. She had shown the world what leadership looked like when it was grounded in principle rather than prejudice. Captain Rebecca Santos's voice came over the intercom with a final announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our descent into Miami International Airport. On behalf of the entire crew, thank you for flying Apex Airways. We hope your experience today has demonstrated our commitment to treating every passenger with the dignity and respect they deserve. Maya smiled as she listened to Rebecca's words. That was exactly the message she wanted every Apex Airways flight to communicate, not through marketing slogans or corporate PR, but through the genuine respect and professionalism that every passenger deserved to experience. The transformation of Apex Airways had begun 30,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, in a first-class cabin where discrimination had been confronted, documented, and decisively defeated by the quiet courage of a woman who refused to accept that her appearance determined her worth. 6 months later, the Apex Airways headquarters in Miami had been transformed into something unprecedented in the aviation industry. Maya Thompson stood before 200 crew members in the company's renovated training facility, but this wasn't just another corporate meeting. Today marked the official launch of the Dignity in Flight program, a comprehensive initiative that would reshape how airlines approached passenger service employee advocacy and corporate accountability. 6 months ago, Maya began, many of you watched a video that went viral across social media platforms. It showed discrimination happening in real time on one of our aircraft, and it revealed cultural problems that we could no longer ignore or minimize. The audience included pilots, flight attendants, gate agents, and customer service representatives from across Apex Airways' network. Many had experienced their own encounters with workplace discrimination, while others had witnessed bias but felt powerless to challenge it. Today they were seeing what institutional change looked like when leadership was committed to transformation, rather than just public relations. Sofia Martinez stood beside Maya wearing the gold wings of Apex Airways' newly created Director of Crew Advocacy position. The pin wasn't just decorative, it represented genuine authority to investigate discrimination complaints, advocate for employee rights, and ensure that crew members never again faced the impossible choice between moral courage and economic survival. When I spoke up during that incident, Sofia addressed the assembled crew. I was terrified of losing my job. I was 3 semesters away from finishing law school, supporting my family, and trying to build a career in an industry that sometimes punished people for doing the right thing. Sofia's voice grew stronger as she continued. But Maya showed me that leadership means protecting the people who take risks to uphold our values. She didn't just promote me. She created a position that ensures every crew member has someone who will listen, investigate, and take action when discrimination occurs. The audience erupted in applause, but Sofia wasn't finished. I want every person in this room to understand that speaking up is not just protected. It's expected. We are never going to create a culture of respect by staying silent when we witness injustice. Maya stepped forward again, holding a tablet that displayed real-time data from the airline's operations. In the 6 months since we implemented our new policies, passenger satisfaction scores have increased by 47%. Employee retention is at an all-time high. Most importantly, we haven't had a single substantiated complaint of discrimination from passengers or crew members. She touched the screen, revealing testimonial videos from passengers who had flown Apex Airways since the changes were implemented. A young black businessman described feeling genuinely welcomed in first class. A Hispanic family talked about crew members who went out of their way to ensure their comfort. An elderly woman in a wheelchair praised the airline's commitment to accessibility and dignity. These aren't marketing testimonials, Maya explained. These are authentic reactions from people who experienced what airline travel should feel like: respectful, professional, and welcoming, regardless of appearance, background, or economic status. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now serving on Apex Airways' Passenger Advocacy Board, had traveled from Boston to attend the ceremony. As a frequent traveler and the physician who documented the original incident, I want to tell you that the changes at Apex Airways have been remarkable. This airline has become a model for how corporations can transform culture through genuine commitment rather than superficial policies. Elena held up her phone showing the video she had recorded 6 months earlier. This documentation helped ensure accountability, but Maya's leadership has created something more important: prevention. The training programs, reporting systems, and advocacy positions you've implemented mean that future incidents like this are far less likely to occur. The training facility's walls displayed before and after statistics that told the story of organizational transformation. Diversity in leadership positions had increased by 60%. Employee satisfaction scores had risen from below industry average to best in class. Customer complaints about service had dropped by 85%, while compliments and commendations had increased dramatically. James Wilson, the passenger whose live stream had made the original incident viral, had been invited to speak about the power of documentation and social media accountability. "Y'all, when I started recording that day, I thought I was just capturing another example of airline drama," he told the audience. But what Ms. Thompson did with that moment changed everything. James's followers on social media had grown to over 200,000, and he had become an advocate for passenger rights and corporate accountability. The video didn't just show discrimination happening. It showed how one person with courage and integrity could transform an entire company. Ms. Thompson didn't just fire a bad employee. She rebuilt the whole system that allowed that employee to operate unchecked. Carlos Mendoza and his wife Maria had flown from their home in Texas to attend the ceremony. Carlos, who had stood up to Captain Morrison during the original incident, now served on a passenger advisory committee that helped Apex Airways understand the experiences of diverse travelers. When I spoke up on that flight, Carlos told the audience I was thinking about my daughter. I wanted her to see that people can challenge authority when it's being abused, even when it feels scary or risky. Maria nodded, adding, "Our daughter watched the viral videos, and now she talks about becoming a pilot herself. She says she wants to work for an airline where everyone is treated with respect, and Apex Airways has become exactly that kind of company." Mrs. Patricia O'Brien, the retired federal judge, had provided legal consultation during Apex Airways' policy transformation. "In my 30 years prosecuting civil rights cases," she said, "I've seen many organizations promise change after discrimination incidents. Most implement cosmetic improvements that fade over time. Apex Airways has done something different. They've created structural changes that make discrimination operationally difficult and career-ending for anyone who attempts it." Patricia gestured toward a display showing the airline's new policies. Anonymous reporting systems, mandatory bias training, diverse hiring practices, and employee advocacy positions aren't just policy statements. They're enforced systems with real consequences and genuine support from leadership. Maya looked out at the audience of crew members who would be responsible for implementing these changes across Apex Airways' entire network. 6 months ago, I experienced discrimination on my own airline because a pilot decided that my appearance indicated I didn't belong in first class. Today, we're launching programs that ensure no passenger and no employee will ever again be judged by anything other than their behavior and their character. She touched her tablet screen again, bringing up the final piece of the day's presentation. "I want to show you what happened to the people involved in that original incident, because accountability without transparency is just revenge, and transparency without accountability is just theater." Captain Derek Morrison's photograph appeared on the screen, followed by a summary of the consequences he had faced. Captain Morrison's pilot license was permanently revoked by federal aviation authorities. He was criminally prosecuted for filing false security reports and convicted of discrimination in employment. He currently works in airport baggage handling, and according to recent reports, he has become an advocate for anti-discrimination training in the aviation industry. Maya's voice carried no satisfaction or vindictiveness as she described Morrison's fate. Morrison's consequences were severe because his actions violated federal law and endangered passenger safety. But the goal was never punishment for its own sake. It was ensuring that similar incidents couldn't happen in the future. Brandon Phillips's photograph appeared next. Mr. Phillips was permanently banned from Apex Airways and faced federal charges for interference with flight operations. His father, Senator Phillips, publicly disowned his behavior and has since become a sponsor of federal anti-discrimination legislation in transportation. Brandon Phillips has completed court-mandated diversity training and now works with civil rights organizations to educate young people about the consequences of prejudice. Sofia Martinez stepped forward for the final part of the presentation. Ms. Thompson didn't just change policies, she changed lives. My promotion to Director of Crew Advocacy allowed me to complete law school with company support. I graduated last month with honors, and I'm using my legal training to ensure that employee rights are protected throughout our organization. Sofia's voice grew emotional as she continued. But the most important change isn't in titles or positions. It's in culture. Crew members know they can speak up without fear. Passengers know they'll be treated with respect regardless of their background. And everyone knows that discrimination has real consequences. Maya approached the podium for her final remarks, looking out at an audience that represented the future of aviation. Diverse, committed, and empowered to create positive change. Ladies and gentlemen, the incident on Flight AX847 was painful and offensive, but it became the catalyst for transformation that will improve travel experiences for millions of people. She paused, thinking about the journey that had brought her from a discriminated passenger to a transformational leader. I didn't buy this airline to prove a point about my own worth. I bought it because I saw potential for excellence that was being undermined by outdated attitudes and inadequate policies. The discrimination I experienced revealed problems, but it also revealed opportunities. Maya's voice carried the quiet strength that had sustained her through years of building her business empire. Today, Apex Airways stands as proof that corporations can choose to be forces for justice rather than perpetrators of bias. We've shown that diversity isn't just morally right, it's operationally superior. We've demonstrated that treating people with dignity isn't just good ethics, it's good business. The audience rose to their feet as Maya concluded her remarks. The applause wasn't just professional recognition, it was genuine appreciation from employees who had experienced firsthand what it felt like to work for an organization that valued their dignity as much as their productivity. Later that afternoon, Maya boarded Flight AX847 for its regular route from Miami to Boston, the same flight number where her transformation of Apex Airways had begun 6 months earlier. This time she was surrounded by a diverse crew trained in dignity and respect passengers from all backgrounds traveling comfortably together, and systems designed to prevent discrimination rather than hide it. Captain Rebecca Santos welcomed passengers aboard with professional warmth, while Sofia Martinez ensured that every traveler felt valued and respected. The first-class cabin was occupied by passengers who had earned their seats through various means: business success, frequent flyer programs, upgrade purchases. But every passenger received identical treatment regardless of their appearance or perceived status. Maya settled into Seat 1A, the same seat where Morrison had tried to humiliate her, and pulled out her tablet to review messages from employees, passengers, and industry observers who had been inspired by Apex Airways' transformation. A young black pilot had written, "Ms. Thompson, because of your courage and the changes at Apex Airways, I applied to your pilot training program. I start next month, and I know I'll be working for a company that values excellence over assumptions." A Hispanic flight attendant messaged, "My daughter wants to be a pilot now because she saw how you handled discrimination with dignity. She says she wants to work somewhere that protects people instead of punishing them for speaking up." A passenger testimonial read, "I've flown Apex Airways 6 times since your incident went viral. Every flight has been exceptional, not because the planes are different, but because the people treating passengers have been trained to see our shared humanity instead of our differences." As Flight AX847 reached cruising altitude, Maya looked around the cabin and saw her vision realized. Passengers were reading, working, sleeping, and conversing without the tension that had characterized her previous experience. Crew members moved through the cabin with confidence and pride, knowing they worked for an organization that supported their values as well as their careers. Sofia Martinez stopped by Maya's seat during the beverage service. "Ms. Thompson," she said with a smile, "how does it feel to fly on the airline?" "You transformed." Maya looked out the window at the clouds below, thinking about the journey from discrimination to dignity that had brought them to this moment. "Sophia," she replied, "it feels like coming home to a place that finally understands what hospitality really means." The video of Maya's confrontation with Captain Morrison had been viewed over 50 million times across social media platforms, but its impact extended far beyond viral entertainment. Corporate training programs used the incident as a case study in leadership and accountability. Law schools analyzed the legal implications of workplace discrimination. Business schools examined the financial benefits of inclusive corporate culture. Maya Thompson never needed Seat 1A to prove her worth, but by claiming it with dignity and transforming the discrimination she faced into institutional change, she had opened doors for everyone who would travel after her. The real first-class experience wasn't about premium seats or luxury amenities. It was about the premium treatment that every human being deserved to receive. True power, Maya had learned, wasn't about commanding respect through authority or intimidation. It was about ensuring that respect was available to everyone regardless of their appearance, background, or perceived status. She had turned a moment of personal humiliation into a catalyst for corporate transformation, proving that individual courage could reshape institutional culture when it was supported by genuine commitment to change. As Flight AX847 began its descent into Boston, Maya smiled at the irony of returning to the same city where she had once been discriminated against at a luxury hotel, an experience that had motivated her to build the business empire that eventually allowed her to purchase and transform an entire airline. Discrimination had tried to diminish her, but Maya Thompson had transformed it into fuel for creating a world where dignity wasn't dependent on status, where respect wasn't rationed based on appearance, and where everyone could travel with the confidence that they belonged exactly where they were. The engines hummed quietly as they approached landing, carrying passengers who might never know that their comfortable, respectful travel experience had been made possible by one woman's refusal to accept that her worth could be determined by anyone other than herself. Before we conclude this story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been told you don't belong somewhere you had every right to be? Share your experience in the comments, because stories like these remind us that dignity is never negotiable. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories of justice and inspiration. Share this video with someone who needs to remember their own worth, and let's build a community where everyone understands that true first class isn't about your seat. It's about treating every person with the respect they deserve. Thank you for watching. And remember that your voice matters. Your dignity is non-negotiable, and sometimes the most powerful response to discrimination is quiet strength combined with unwavering courage.